Hello, Lines and Spaces listeners. This week we are welcomed by Dean, Claire, and Jason Wu. I'm your host, William, and welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us this week on Lines and Spaces. As you can hear, our esteemed guest Will just introduced everybody. I am still your main host, Jason. This week, not joined by Michaela because she is off musicking somewhere, doing something great. And this week, we will be talking about instrumental music and the focus of instrumental music between band and string orchestra or orchestra in general. And my colleagues here are all from instrumental backgrounds. We're going to be talking a little bit about our experiences in the field, both while at school, in our pre service term, and kind of thinking about instrumental music on a broader scope. Let's start with some introductions. We're going to jump to Claire. Claire, you are a returning guest on Lines and Spaces, but just for the listeners who may not have heard you, who are you?
My name is Claire, and I'm a cellist and general music teacher.
Dean.
Hi, my name is Dean. I am a trumpet player, and I am still currently a student finishing up my degree at Temple University in music ed. And I'm also an assistant band director for a local high school marching band.
William.
Hey, I'm William. I am a woodwind player, so clarinet, saxophone, and flute. I just recently graduated Temple University, and next year I will be a music teacher in the Philadelphia School District.
Yeah, and I am Jason, and I am a tuba player and will be an instrumental music teacher for lower school and middle school music, and also doing some general music teaching as well. So this is our panel of talkers today. So kind of going into our first question here, kind of talking about our background in instrumental music. I'm curious, why did we end up where we are? Like what things happened for us to choose the instruments that we decided to choose, and kind of our story in kind of finding our instruments, why we stuck with it, and maybe even why music education as a fuel of pursuit. I'm gonna throw this question over to Dean.
So initially, I did not play the trumpet. I initially started out playing the euphonium, but I always kind of wanted to play the trumpet. And so I switched at one point, and I really was not very good at it. I had a really hard time, making a good sound, really understanding the music thing. But just about in middle school, I started taking like private lessons, and I started to understand a little more, which kind of I think partially made me realize like the power of education and teaching and coaching in music. And then once I did that, I really fell in love with it, and I've been playing the trumpet ever since. And in terms of music education, I've had a lot of good teachers, a lot of good band directors that have just kind of inspired me to want to do that for students myself.
Awesome. William.
So in fourth grade, the band director at my school gave everyone who was interested in playing an instrument a form to fill out. And on that form, it was like, what instrument do you want to play? And I put clarinet, flute, and percussion. And I put clarinet because my older sister played clarinet. And then they ended up giving me a clarinet. And I just had a lot of fun with it. In sixth grade, I went to play in the jazz ensemble, but there weren't any saxophones, so they gave me a saxophone. Um, Fell in love with it, continued to do music up until like now. And along the path, there were just so many great opportunities that I took advantage of, and now I'm here.
Yeah, and William's done with music now, as he said. He's gotten to this point and he's thinking about quitting. But um, but
Over.
no, thank you, William. And last but not least, Claire. What did your upbringing look like in this?
So my experience is pretty similar. I always knew I wanted to play a string instrument and cello. Actually, my sister played violin, so I was like, I need to be different. But I still like cello, anyways. And my school at the time, I don't know if they do this anymore, but they started the strings at fourth grade and the band at fifth grade. So I was like, I'm not gonna wait. I don't know if that's a common thing that schools still do, but anyways, I decided to pursue music because it was such a huge part of my childhood growing up, and I just didn't see myself doing anything else. I was like, just gonna continue doing this. It's fun, I guess. Yeah.
And now Claire is here. We're all kind of here talking about music and kind of upbringing towards it. Mine is very similar to all of yours, kind of having siblings who are playing instruments in the band, in the orchestra. And I was also taking private lessons in piano starting second grade, which kind of transitioned me into playing viola because my sister played violin and I wanted to be cool and I was like, I want to play viola. Might have been a mistake, but who knows? So I did a little bit of that, and then it wasn't really until middle school I played clarinet for a week, and I hated it because the idea of having a piece of wood that you stick into your mouth and let it soak and putting it back into your case after rehearsal did not speak well to me. And then so I quit band and I just did kind of choir and orchestra. And then eighth grade I started playing trumpet. Similar to Dean, I had a lesson teacher on trumpet over the summer going into my freshman year of high school because I wanted to be a part of the marching band. And I think working with him really opened up my idea of kind of that education of like getting that focused look at with this private one-on-one teaching, which kind of really helped me develop a sense of brass playing. And then it wasn't really until sophomore year where me and a colleague of mine, or a friend at the time, decided that we both wanted to play tuba because all the tuba players had graduated. So I jumped in and started playing tuba and have loved the instrument ever since. And I'm here now, still playing tuba and enjoying it. And besides the financial deficit of buying an instrument of that degree, everything else is great. And something that I'm curious about is when we were kind of picking our instruments. This is kind of a question that I've been thinking about a lot as I'm going into my first year of teaching and kind of introducing instruments. The idea of like stereotyped instruments, did that kind of ever influence your choice at all? I know it's something that's hopefully gonna go out of fashion. That that instruments are genderized, which is not a good thing at all, and that like certain players have certain personalities, which they all come from someplace. I'm just curious, did that really kind of affect your choice in deciding the instrument? And anybody can just go.
Me personally, no. If I had to pick a band instrument, I remember I was thinking I would pick trombone. So I feel like cello and trombone are like two, I know, stereotypically male oriented instruments just because it's like a lower clef, but I never felt any pressure to pick a certain instrument.
I also never personally felt any pressure with that. I just kind of always wanted to play the trumpet. But I mean, even in my school, like my classmates that I grew up with, like people did generally fall into like stereotypical, gender instruments. Like I didn't have any like boys that played flute, or like I don't think there's any girls until people switched in high school that played like the trumpet or drums. Um, so I mean, definitely those stereotypes exist. Obviously, that's not a good thing. But even I guess that was like 10 years ago, but those kind of things still happen.
Yeah, and I never really experienced anything like that, but in like my uh, growing up with music, when I see people choosing instruments for people to play, usually be based on if they're like able to hold it, or if they're playing trombone, reach that low note if they're a small fourth grader.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of our points here regarding kind of that idea. I think my school definitely didn't have that too much. Though, like Dean said, it kind of just happened to be that way. Like where we predominantly had female players play flute and clarinet and some of the upper woodwinds, and then as we got lower, it was more male. But what was actually really cool was my tuba section in high school was predominantly female and not, well, not cool, but like it was like interesting to kind of see that, and also like me as like a smaller built individual playing an instrument so big was kind of something that my parents pointed out to me. And a lot of the low brass players that I kind of work with nowadays for marching band are also female, which I'm glad this is kind of like slowly transitioning into not being a stereotypical and gender choice thing. And why I kind of also brought up this question was I recently started teaching a student who plays clarinet, but wanted to play flute, and their parent had mentioned something like, "Oh, girls play flute," and I was like, "Oh, well, how do you kind of deal with that? Like, how do you talk through students with that? Like, how do you start breaking down those gender identifications towards instruments, which of course are biased in certain stereotypes that have grown throughout time." And I'm glad to see that it is slowly transitioning away. I don't think I see too much of that nowadays in the classroom. So I was just curious in general, like how if that ever played a role into our decision into the choosing our main instruments. And I'm glad to hear that it didn't play too much of a role, but as we all have heard, it still kind of is in the background. Like it still happens every now and then. And kind of talking about that point of like instrument choice and whatnot, like in terms of our ensembles, being a band member or an orchestra member, what, how was that like? Well, speaking of kind of going through ensembles in your elementary, middle, high school, and even in college, do you think it was like that influenced your kind of impact into wanting to continue learning music, being in that ensemble setting and performance?
Yeah, for me, I went to a summer camp every year from like fourth grade until um, like 10th grade, and then I became a counselor. But that whole time I was doing small ensembles, so little quartets. Either when I was younger, I was paired with older students, but I was always collaborating and working with other students, and a teacher would pop in every now and then. But I like had that chance to like figure it out myself and like collaborate with other students, which was really impactful for me.
Something that like I think in like my philosophy of music is that playing music like for a lot of kids and students, it's all about the hang and having fun. And even uh, like in college and high school, and even when you're just starting, I've had over the past year beginner clarinet students who never got to play in like a beginner group setting, and they just couldn't enjoy playing clarinet because they had no one else to play with. Um, and yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Certainly through, elementary and high school, like being in different ensembles and being with, the friends that I made in band were the best parts of school for me. It made school like people always talk about the nightmares of high school and stuff, but like I always had band and I had my friends there and it was all cool. And then once I got to Temple, similarly, a lot of my favorite experiences were playing in ensembles. Famously, Jason and I's brass quintet, the bottom of the barrel brass quintet was one of the highlights of me being at Temple. But yeah, I mean, ensemble playing, and I know this would be the same with vocalists too. I mean, making music together is always going to generate certain things, but that highlights to me the importance of music education and ensembles.
No, I think that's really cool. And why I kind of brought up this question was I think William had mentioned that this past year with COVID and quarantine and everything, a lot of students, especially instrumentalists, and of course also vocalists, it became very difficult for them to kind of enjoy music to its fullest because they didn't have that collaboration and that kind of group work. They didn't get to meet people, especially the younger grades that were transitioning. They didn't get to kind of meet with their with other members of the band, other members of the ensemble, and they kind of just weren't able to kind of fully integrate into that community. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why there was so much. I'm sure we've all noticed it, like drop off in participation in these activities. And they think that's one of the biggest reasons they didn't get half of what the learning process was, which, as William mentioned, is that hanging out with people. And I definitely had a similar experience to all of us where music was just that place that I was at all the time, and the friends that I've made were some of the best friends that I've had throughout my entire life. And I'm just making music together was kind of one of the best parts of it, and just being able to collaborate, being able to talk to people, and everything. And I think for me, marching band in high school was like the go-to for that. And I'm sure all ensembles kind of had that feeling. So I was just kind of curious. I'm sure other people listening have had that similar experience where music is this great community and you kind of live in it. And then, of course, with this past year, with it kind of going away, has definitely tremendously detrimented the our recruitment and how to maintain students and also the enthusiasm for the class. So I was kind of curious what our perspectives were, and to also say out there that like if you're thinking about picking up an instrument, you're thinking about getting your students or your kids involved in music. Um, I think it's a great time to just kind of start and do that because they'll probably get that kind of full experience coming into this year. And I'm sure, like all of us had mentioned, you'll make some of the best people that you'll know will probably come from that. And yeah. So moving on to another thing that I was curious about, talking about our pre-service education. As we know, so in music ed, we are pre-service until we get certified after our student teaching semester is what it normally looks like. And speaking from like the instrumental side, I know a lot of all of us went to the same school, so we have a very niche look into what that program looks like. But I'm just in terms of your experiences in a pre-service instrumental music ed program, how did that kind of either open up your ideology, what has it influenced, and kind of what did that training kind of look like, and how prepared do you feel kind of going out there into the field? And I'll throw it to Dean.
So I feel very appreciative that I went pretty much specifically to Temple, but to a school where there's integration between all sorts of majors within the music program. It's not just the music education majors are kind of in one section and the performance majors are in another section. Like the music education majors are expected to play at similar levels to the performance majors, and no one really, I don't know, would skid by. I had the experience like studying with great teachers, both classically, and I also took jazz lessons for a bit, just world class musicians, um, where I mean, like we've been saying, just like continuing to foster um, growth in music and learning from such good teachers, even in the more performance side, learning aspects of how to educate and how to teach. Because in some respects, everybody who goes into music is a teacher at some level. So it was really good, just the integration of everyone in the music school.
I agree with Dean. Like we were all very fortunate to go to Temple, where we can study with Philadelphia Orchestra members and incredible professional musicians, and it just so happens to also have an amazing music ed program and like probably top five jazz program. So if you make it how you want it, you can get the experience of it all, and then you're able to teach to such a diverse group of students who want to do different things in their life. Like, I'm a clarinet player who can probably teach like jazz to any instrument or orchestral stuff to. I just feel really prepared. And that wasn't like a plug saying go to Temple. That's just my experience.
Yeah, I chose Temple because it has the way that Temple's music ed program is set up. There's no separate tracks. There's no orchestra track and band track and choral track. It's not um, separated like that. So we have to take all of these classes and learn how to teach everything. If you're interested in doing like or taking or going to a college where it's separated like that, there are pros and cons to that. But I gained a lot of knowledge in my teaching choir class and you know, things teaching jazz. Like I've never done that before, but you know, maybe I could. Maybe. I think I could. It's I did learn about it. So
And I think as we all mentioned, that diversification of being in that kind of community and being upheld to the same standards. I think a lot of times, I think for both instrumentalists and vocalists, there's the flag that you do music ed because you can't play, um, which is simply not true. I think of any college anywhere out there, music educators take lessons and do performances. Up to the same level sometimes as the performance majors, and they're still held up to the expectation that they can function their instrument and be proficient at their instrument on top of everything else. Like that's still the goal, is that performance piece and your ability to perform is key, because in music, performance and the process of learning how to perform is key. And I think something that Claire had mentioned that I really think is really cool is being an instrumentalist and being exposed to this wider range of teaching. I will say, I think last week our podcast was about general music. I had no idea what general music was, and coming from as an instrumentalist, my fear was like, oh, what if I end up having to teach general music? Like, I don't. What does that kind of entail? And I think a program like that to really kind of open up the ideas and kind of give us the experience to interact in those settings is super important to make people feel prepared or be able to step into a position that may not be their focus. And I'm curious if any of that's kind of transitioned into your own teaching methodology within an instrumental program. Like, is there anything you learned in our choir classes or our pre-service choral teaching classes or our general music classes that kind of have trickled into like our instrumental teaching? And you can anybody can jump
I
in.
picked up something in my orchestra placement for student teaching. My cooperating teacher always said sound before sight. If you're like teaching rhythm or like you're teaching a passage, always do it by sound first instead of looking at it, and that applies to general music 100%,
Mhm.
or anything else choir too. So.
I think that just having to teach so many different environments that I wasn't necessarily comfortable in, just let different teaching skills like planning and scaffolding and things that contribute to a good lesson just at like an accelerated pace. Just got I got better at it because I was constantly put in situations that I wasn't necessarily familiar with or familiar with or comfortable with. And I think that just really helped teaching no matter what the scenario.
Yeah, no, and I definitely agree with everybody there. One of my biggest takeaways from kind of my
Yeah,
other
and
courses
no
into
matter
instrumental
like
teaching is
what you're
how
teaching, I
much
think
I
experience in
learn
front of
from general
students
music
and
that I
like
bring into
getting
the
better at
instrumental classroom. I think
communicating with
Claire had mentioned
students and
the
getting to
idea
know
of
students is
sound before
universal
sight and
for
the whole
teaching, no
methodology.
matter
I
what
believe
subject you're doing.
MLT, which is like audiation and whatnot, is so important in getting students to be exposed to different types of sounds, living in different tonalities, and then putting on top of them reading notes. And that's something that I'll always think about is my whenever I teach like a beginner lesson, as outside of putting the instrument together and the building blocks to it, we never look at any written music. It's always repeat after me or echoing things off of me or just listening to music and kind trying to reproduce the music without looking at sheet music because that develops intrinsic skills to music like listening and also memorization and even just remembering and echoing back because those are key roles to how we play in music. And something even from the choral standpoint, of course, me being a low brass player, it's all about air and all about if you can sing it, you can play it. I'm sure all brass players have heard this saying before. And what I learned in choral teaching is that it's very similar to that, where the whole idea of using your voice, using your air, is paramount to the success of how you change your pitches and how you change your consonances, how you kind of use your voice to vocalize certain passages and thinking about music in terms of lyrics. I think something that my teacher has kind of taught me, my private teacher, is that when we look at a passage of music, whether you're playing an ensemble or like a solo, what words can you put underneath this sound? And how would you say it to somebody? I was learning, I don't know what I was learning. I was learning a Brahms thing that was originally meant for vocalists that I'm playing on tuba. And he told me, well, listen to the original. What were they singing? Where were they breathing? What did that phrasing look like? And that kind of, I never, sadly, I never thought about it like that before. But like once he kind of opened that up to me, I've been doing that more and more. Whenever I get new music or I look through music in method books, I'm like, well, what if we try to put words to this? Like, what mood does this inflect? What words we put to it to characterize the music? Which I thought was really interesting and cool. And this is another question for all of you. This idea, this is something I've been curious about in terms of our kind of learning. Is this the balance between process and product? So I think a lot of instrumentalists and even vocalists, I don't know if our experiences, but my predominantly was the goal was to perform. Like our biggest thing that we did was we performed concerts, and kind of how we got there was kind of secondary. We had like, all of our band rehearsals were always based around learning the music for the next concert, and this is something that I've been thinking about more and more is that it's really imbalanced. Like we performance is like the top and like the main grade, whereas kind of everything that kind of leads up to the performance is kind of isn't as much. If I remember correctly, in my high school, like our main grade was attend the concert and be on stage at this time and play it. Cool. If you did that, you would probably get an A or a B at the end of the year. And I'm curious what we kind of think about that balance, just because us being all instrumentalists, I'm sure all of us have performed X amount of times. Um, where is that emphasis? Do you think that performance should be kind of the paramount, or what are some ways we can make the process feel like it's at the same kind of scale as the performance? We could take
My
a yeah,
oh,
yeah, Will, go ahead.
my high school is like the opposite of that. Well, not like the opposite, but you were graded based on primarily if you attended rehearsals. Like attendance to like band rehearsals is what like makes the students better. And I think something that is very important when programming music is making sure that it's music that is something that can help the students get better, like something that focuses on certain aspects of music, like phrasing or articulation or note grouping, whatever it is, and gradually getting the students to like practice these technical things through the repertoire they're learning in class.
Yeah, what comes to mind when you ask this question is one of my bigger like philosophies in within like instrumental music, which is that just like band and orchestra and chorus, I mean, all everything kind of as it's traditionally done has almost zero focus on creativity. And um I think that that is something that I'd like to change, at least in my curriculum going forward, because really, when we think about it, like even the top orchestras, um, the composer and the conductor are really the people that are expressing during this, and everyone else is really just a technician, kind of to reenact and to enact like the wishes of the composer and the conductor. But I think that within like an education space, within schools, high schools, middle schools, what have you, giving as much space to be creative as possible, whether that is like to improvise or compose or to give their own thoughts on the process of how this should sound. I think that should be um, a lot of teachers' main emphasis, because otherwise, well, of course, like music and band teaches like problem solving the same way that math teaches problem solving, but without kind of that emphasis of creativity, there's really not much difference. It's just you're learning a skill, and I think that there's a big benefit to introducing creativity and make it not just making it about, okay, by the end of the semester, can we perform this perfectly, you know?
Yeah, 100% agree. I don't think I have anything to add on top of that.
I think yeah, William and Dean, you really kind of summed up what I was kind of getting at. Yeah, that creative aspect and just kind of finding music that is both enjoyable and kind of continues having the music that you perform being part of the process of learning. I think is super important and kind of breaking that down. I really could not have stated any better way between both of you. So yeah, thank you for kind of talking about that because it's such a weird struggle, that idea of process and product, because you want to have a good performance, but you had to allocate a lot of rehearsal time to just rehearsing music to in order to have a good performance. And like how do we kind of balance that out? Like how can we still add on other supplementary learning materials on top of our, like Dean had mentioned, like creative study? How can we get students to think about their music, kind of create their own thoughts about the music, and how do you get them invested in the music? um, that isn't just like, oh, we're just performing this type of thing. Like I think Dean made a great analogy about the state of some classical orchestras is kind of the reenacting music, and the conductor and the composer kind of give the expression. Everybody else just kind of follows along. And I think, yeah, what's super important is getting students to recognize what their music is, what they want to do with their own music, and what that kind of looks for them into the future so that they can start thinking creatively and using their musical voice, as I like to say it, to kind of upbring that. That kind of leads me into, we were talking a little bit about philosophy, and but before we get to that point, I do want to talk about balance. I think instrumentalists can be used in many different ways. Of course, education, performance, and then like there's a multitude of different like chamber things and large ensemble things that we can get invested in and do. Um, how? Oh, maybe not in terms of too much talking about while we were in the pre-service and now looking forward into the in-service part. Like, what have you been doing to kind of find that balance? I'm sure many of us will be teaching and still want to perform and still want to do professional development and still need to sleep and still need to eat. Like what are we envisioning and thinking about like balance in that regard? And I'm gonna jump this question to Claire.
Um, I guess I don't know. I think it's important to take breaks. It doesn't, it could be a day, could be a week, could be longer than that, maybe. But like, I think it's really important to know when it's time to step away from your instrument. I think that is what helped save me from like a lot of burnout, playing and then just focusing on teaching, student teaching. Like, it becomes a lot, and it's important to understand when it's time for you to take a break.
Yeah, I agree with Claire, and like teachers in general, not just music teachers, are so like generous with their time. Like teachers spend so much of their time teaching and preparing to teach. And I think music teachers even more so than a lot of other teachers, where it's so much of your time is devoted that you are going to have less time to perform and, like you said, sleep and eat and have social lives and families and whatnot. So for me personally, at the very moment, I don't have a lot of drive to really want to perform. Like that's not something that I feel like I need to make time for at this moment or maybe in the future. But that's a huge thing, and it's going to cost other things, giving up other things to really want to be a part of a you know community orchestra that plays at a high level, or a chamber group that you start, or a rock band that you enjoy playing in. Um, it's just other things kind of have to be sacrificed in order to do that, because you're already giving so much of your time to teaching.
Yeah, I like never want to stop playing music. That's one of my goals as I continue to be a teacher. And one of the best things that anyone can do, someone who wants to continue to be a serious musician, is to create a routine. Like the hardest part of practicing is getting out your instrument because that's just so tough. Like you'd rather just stay on the couch. But if you continue like a routine, and of course every day is going to be different, and with like schedules changing, whatever happens, picking up a routine to keep on practicing and setting goals for yourself, because for over the summer, or people who aren't in ensembles or in school have nothing to practice for, you have to set goals for yourself to set up certain um, like checkpoints to keep up on your instrument by this certain time or whatever it is.
No, I think that's, yeah, that's super important. I think all three of you had mentioned great points, and I'll reiterate something that Claire had mentioned about taking breaks, with setting boundaries to yourself. This is something I'm learning more and more, because the colleagues that I've started interacting with in my new job have all kind of mentioned this idea of setting boundaries and knowing when to say no, and just, of course, you want to be generous with your time, but you don't want to do it at the cost of your own mental health and of course your own sanity in the field, and being recognizing when things are overloaded, when you're kind of tired out, and make sure that even if you don't need the break and like, oh, I have this free day, I should do something with it. Maybe just take that free day and just don't do anything, because I think if you set up a routine, like William said, to take breaks, between everything else and taking a good amount of time off every now and then, and really just using that time for yourself and not for others is super important. And this is something, of course, I am learning to slowly get into, because I think as many of us who are kind of have that educator personality, we always want to sacrifice our time and our space for our students and even our colleagues. And at times, it may not be the best thing to do. Even though we want to help, it's not, we want to make sure that you want to make sure that you yourself are doing well so that you can perform at your highest when you need to be in the setting. So definitely routinely scheduling out when you can take those pauses within your day or your week or the month is super important. Um, so we're about to kind of come to the end of our episode here, and I kind of just wanted to close this out here with kind of a sharing of maybe our philosophies around instrumental music or music in general, and kind of any kind of maybe tidbits to give to pre-service educators that are coming in, first year teachers that are kind of stepping into roles, and of course we are all stepping into those first year teaching roles. So if we can't speak too much about that, that is okay. We're just kind of talking about like what are things that have kind of helped us through our pre-service education that has kind of kept us kind of going and continuing to do what we love and whatnot.
Uh,
Um, oh, you can go, Claire.
Mine will be quick. I just have to say, learning how to make music on or like in different ways, like for example, piano, guitar, that's how I kind of balanced my burnout with cello, is making music on other instruments or in other ways. So I would highly encourage exploring other ways of making music.
Yeah, I kind of touched on like more of my philosophy earlier, where it's just encourage creativity in everything, no matter what you're teaching, general music, instrumental music at high level, just beginners, like encourage creativity. And then my advice for someone entering just entering music education would be to get out there and teach. Like if you went to a summer camp when you were younger for music and you could ask to teach, or if you have a marching band you could try to teach at, or just anything to get in front of students as quickly as possible. My like sophomore year I started teaching at a high school with marching band, and like interacting with students and getting feedback about what actually works and what doesn't and how to talk. It was just invaluable, and it makes the classes you take also more valuable, because now you have experience to draw upon, um, like and give reference to everything you're learning from textbooks and from your teachers.
And for all you new teachers out there, I just encourage you to continue to love music, because if that's why you're doing music education, because you love music, then keep on loving it. Do ensembles that you love, listen to music that you love, and share that love with your students. Make them have fun playing music just like you did, and find ways that uh, like sort of tricks to make your students love music the same way you do. Just keep experimenting, keep trying, and it's a great time.
Trick your students into liking.
Haha, just like we're all victims of.
No, but yeah, no, I agree with everything that we just mentioned, and I guess my closing thought for any educators or pre-service educators coming into this field, for kind of like the pre-service side of it, as students coming in or you're coming back for year 2 or year 3 of college and learning about music ed, is to take risks and also to kind of explore new things. I think one of the hardest things to do is let go of what you're comfortable with and trying something new. But we learn, I think, the best when we try something new and either fail or succeed. And I think failure is one of the best teachers to kind of guide you. And I think I've learned so much from the failures that I've made in my teachings than I ever did in my successes, because you remember those moments and you draw upon them in your reflections. And it's something that I was actually talking to one of my past co-ops who's been teaching for 30 plus years in the field, And something that what I loved about his energy, why I loved working with him so much, was that he was in his 30th plus year of teaching, and he was still trying new things and learning new things. And I think a lot of music educators will eventually fall into a routine of things, especially instrumentalists, with it being such a traditional field, unlike general music and even sometimes choir and orchestra. It has such a found well, no, orchestra falls in the same category, or there's such a big history around why we learn instrumental music, whether that's because of patriotism or whatnot from olden days, that we've kind of followed this routine of tradition and whatnot. And there's nothing wrong with it. It does kind of create this stagnant kind of field that a lot of instrumental teachers are kind of in. And what he kind of got me to understand was like the more that you can explore, the more that you can try something new, the more that you can learn outside of the things you would feel comfortable doing, and the more you include and stay up to date with that learning process, the more fun you're going to have in the classroom. Because the students, if you do that, and you'll be able to engage with their students more. And I think why we teach at the end of the day and why we are doing what we're doing, besides loving music, is working with students and having them explore music and seeing them be successful in music. Because at the end of the day, helping the students and helping them learn and kind of being with them and helping them out in those ways is why we teach, is to help students discover who they are and help them shape their identity in ways that they want to be into the future. But yeah, all that to say, to just keep being you, keep teaching, try new things, and keep being awesome. Take breaks and everything. From all of our guests here today, any closing thoughts before we ended our episode today?
Woo!
Woo! All right, well,
So,
this will
Thanks
do
for
it.
having us.
Of course,
yeah.
yeah. Thank you again for the fruitful conversation. I really planning this episode without Michaela because she is off musicking and doing some beautiful work um, was stressful because I was like, what are we supposed to talk about? This is such a big thing. And I'm glad to have the three of you here to kind of bounce off of and introduce things that I didn't even think about regarding my thought process with it. And I hope to kind of explore maybe in the future more about instrumental music once we all get more experience in the actual field itself. Um, but that will do it for our episode today of Lines and Spaces. Thank you again to our returning guest Claire and to Dean and William. We hope to have you guys all back eventually sometime in the future. And I want to thank everybody for listening in or watching us on YouTube. It's season 2 has been great, and we love all the support. And I know Michaela also as well loves the support that we're getting, and we've been having a lot of fun making this and talking about music in all different ways. But that is gonna do it for us today. We'll see ya, and keep on teaching. Bye.